good morning, everyone.
Morning. Good morning.
Morning, Tim. Hey, I love when there's audience participation. My name is Tim Erickson. I'm honored to serve as current chairman of the board of directors for our Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our board and staff, I just want to welcome you all today for this luncheon with the legislators. And thank you for being here. We're especially grateful for our legislators that are joining us and their continued support and service to the people and businesses in our area. One of the Chamber's most important roles is bringing together businesses and policymakers to foster meaningful conversations, and today's event provides that. We hope to strengthen those relationships. We want to share our perspectives and discuss the issues that impact our local economy, our workforce, and our quality of life here. Chamber is committed to advocating for a business climate that encourages innovation, investment, and opportunity. And we recognize that the decisions made at the Capitol have a direct impact on that for employers of all sizes. So we value this opportunity to have open, constructive conversations and with those who represent us. Thank you to you for participating. Your continued leadership and engagement helps in this endeavor. Your involvement helps ensure that the voice of the business community is heard and that Minnesota remains a great place to work. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to our moderator, Steve Kosbad, and the legislative panel. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As Tim said, I am Steve Kosbad. I'm the Energy Services Manager at Meeker Energy. We're an electric cooperative, formerly Meeker Cooperative. We changed our name a year ago and serve most of the Meeker County area and the fringes of it. Other part of my job is Energy Services Manager, among many other things. One of them is legislative and regulatory affairs. So I have interfaced multiple times over the years with these four people in our stage here. In areas that focus on electricity and energy, and it's not just like for Meeker County; it's for statewide. As rural electric cooperatives, we have an association that bands together and meets with our legislators and has our energy issues. For example, one of them is lifting the nuclear moratorium. And I'm not going to go into our stuff, but Minnesota is the only state in the nation that has a moratorium on even submitting a certificate of need for nuclear power. So so in order to meet the 2023 legislation, which was 100% carbon-free energy by 2040, we got okay, how are we going to do this? Because the wind don't blow all the time, the sun don't shine, and if you want carbon-free, we're going to need some nuclear energy, more than what just Xcel has. So it's been a big issue. We've made some traction and had some good discussion. But anyway, that's an example of the things that I work on legislative issues. However, I came here to Litchfield in 2014 when I began my employment here at Meeker Energy. And I've been working with electric cooperatives for more than 36 years. So my involvement with the chamber, and we want to keep that focus here, is our chamber focus on businesses, is that I was a previous board member for 6 years, served as a president. Then there's been this ad hoc committee, what we call advocacy or legislative, and we've continued this on. So it's only been 2 or 3 of us, and we show up at the first day of the legislative session, usually in February or January, and meet with our legislators, and then we go on from there and have different meeting days with them, and lots of emails and phone calls and text back and forth. But as far as the chamber goes, we're taking the Litchfield and Meeker area chamber is taking a more proactive stance on this and becoming to involve businesses. I don't think there's ever been anything like this much here in Litchfield, so we're taking a proactive stance and approach. And again, thank you for all coming. I talked to one other person just prior to the meeting, and they go, I'm not even sure who these people are. I don't know what districts they're in and where they cover. So this is a good learning experience, and they'll talk about that and where they're from and the districts they have. And then you can always get on Find My Legislator or My Legislative District on the website, put in your address, and it'll pop up with their photographs and mugshots, so you can know who that is.
Oh, I see.
We're represented here today by the healthcare industry, housing, city and county government, manufacturing, finance, utilities, service industries here, hospitality. There's a hospitality here I happen to know, and so it's a good mix of things for this event. And again, I just wanted to focus just so that everybody kind of knows, has heard these anyway. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is overall political message this last year has been for Minnesota to become more of a pro-growth, not just pro-growth, but more of a pro-growth state. Reduce costs. Gee, that's one we hear all the time, and it's you got to play that music. Encourage private sector investment and compete more aggressively with neighboring states. Boy, we hear that often, obviously, with South Dakota and North Dakota next door. So with that kind of stage setting, and I also want to make sure that you all know this, and I've warned our legislative panel here, this is a nonpartisan event. This is not campaigning. This is just a post-session legislative follow-up on the issues that happen. And sure, we're going to talk about things that we'd like to see, what didn't happen, what we'd like to see next year, and things like that. But we're going to keep this nonpartisan. All right. So I know that there were some questions about different things that were partisan. I'm not even going to bring those up later on. If we have that opportunity, we'll go from there. So legislative panels, thank you guys for being here, and I can advance the slides for you if somebody gives me the high sign, and whoever wants to go first, I'll let you guys pick.
Yeah, go ahead. I guess I can start first. Well, you're first on the list, so maybe I'll let you go first.
I'll decide.
Yeah. The elder statesman in the room, right?
Yeah, right.
So my name is Andrew Lang. I have distinct honor of serving, let's see, from Walmart West in Meeker County is the best way to think about it. So technically speaking, you have 3 senators and 3 House members that represent all of Meeker County. So you are in kind of a paradox of who you want to talk to on what topic. So we, myself and Scott, represent pretty much from, like I said, Walmart westbound. I have all of Kansas County, all of Renville County, all of Chippewa County. So I do, range quite a ways. I don't know if the next slide talks about it, but I should probably talk about I'm in my 3rd term, so I'm 10 years into this. I first was elected in 2016. I'm married, 2 boys. I just had a high school graduate. I have a kid he's going to be 16 and driving real soon here, the younger one. So that's interesting. But legislatively, I have always been highly involved in ag. I've been on ag finance, ag policy committees throughout my tenure. Very heavily involved in environmental committees, both policy and finance as well. I've been on transportation for years. I think 8 of my 10 years I've been on transportation committee. And I'm also highly involved with the Veterans Affairs Committee. So I haven't been on that committee for about 4 years, but I've been in the background working on that. So it's kind of near and dear to my heart. I've been in the National Guard for almost 25 years. That's something I work pretty hard on. And then on an annual basis, I'm kind of hitting my swan song as far as the Outdoor Heritage Council, which is a year-round. It goes with 1/3 of the legacy dollars. That's the self-imposed sales tax, a 0.3% sales tax that Minnesota does on all sales throughout the state. It ends up being around $450 million annually. It goes to install, enhance, protect the outdoor habitat. It goes with projects like that. So that one's year-round. I'm supposed to be in Winona for all day on Tuesday next week dealing with that. But I've been doing that for about 8 years, and we put a term limit bill on last year for 8 years, so I'm kind of kicking myself off of the board. So that's coming up pretty quickly. Let's see. You don't want to get into anything just quite yet, do you?
Just introductions right now. Maybe Scott,
Okay.
you want
I'll keep my mouth shut and move on.
Okay, I'm Scott Van Binsbergen. I'm your state representative in District 16A. I obviously know many of you, met you over the last 2 years. I just got elected about a year and a half ago, November of 24. And many of you obviously know Dean Erdahl. Dean served as in the same role I am. Dean was the legislator for 22 years and decided to retire, and then I campaigned for the job. I probably won't be here 22 years from now, but it's an honor to be able to serve you. I live in Montevideo. I am married. I've been married for, I hate to say this, I look a lot younger than I really am. I've been married for 30 years. We've got 3 kids, 2 in college, 1 in high school. And in fact, our youngest is a junior, and we're at the state, I was just talking with Jason, we're at the state track meet this weekend, and he ran an 800 and got second in the state, so we're pretty excited to watch that. I have been in private business for myself since my college days. I've owned and operated a number of different businesses, probably 10 different companies that I've owned at my peak. I probably had about 200 and a little over 200 people that worked for my businesses. And I bought, sold, I still have a business where we have about 150 employees. I have lived in Montevideo my entire life, raised my family there, and I grew up there, came back home, started a business from scratch. And I appreciate the chamber doing this today. I've been part of my local chamber. I've been sitting right where you are, being part of the chamber. I was the president of my chamber, and my business has been a chamber member for a number of years. So it's an honor for me to be able to give and serve you all in St. Paul. So that's my introduction.
So Representative.
So Andrew represents the whole Senate district. I represent the half the 16, and then Dave Baker in Wilmer would represent the other half.
16B.
So
Representative Gilman.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. Dawn Gilman. I live in Dassel, Minnesota. I am blessed to be, we just finished up it would be my fourth session, so second term. And I served as co-vice chair of Human Services, and I'm on health. So they popped me right into health and human services right away. I put that down as, things that you'd be interested in when I got into the legislature, and I put 1 and 2 for health and human services, and they call it other things, it's a lot. It's a lot with people. It's a lot of amazing things that we get to do in human services, and also challenging things. The other thing I've got to serve, I've been a part of the environment and natural resources the whole time I've been there. So those committees, they've kind of locked me in and said, you're going to stay where you're at. So it's a lot to learn. So I'm married 32, it'll be 32 years in 2 days. I'll be married to my high school sweetie. We have a manufacturing company in Dassel, just under 50 employees. So I love it. Boots on the ground. Tomorrow I'm serving brats if anybody wants to come over. We're cooking, making homemade potato salad, having fun. So we have fun with our team, and an extension of our family. Our employees are an extension of our family. I've got 5 kids, only 1 more at home. And I thought it would be such a sad thing to see them. I have a 16-year-old daughter, they say. So 2 biological, 3 adopted. I serve not only Meeker County, a good chunk of Meeker County, I serve McLeod County, and I got folks here from McLeod. So McLeod County, a sliver of Wright County, and then a very small part of Sidley County as well. So again, I love politics. I always have loved politics. I love people. And that's why I think I'm humbled by being able to do this job. I was in network marketing for a lot of years. So you end up learning how to hear the word no, and you just keep trudging forward, and you just find more people to lock arms with. So I love working bipartisanly. We had to do that in order for anything to pass this legislative, session and this last year and this year, we had to have a bipartisan support. And so I think it's been great for Minnesota. I think it's great for our legislature to have to find friends across the aisle. I think that's what makes better governance, and I'm glad that I got to be a part of that. And yeah, so I also just got elected to be on the LCCMR. So that's the other side of, you got legacy. So I get to work with lottery money, and I think it's
There's a lot of acronyms you're throwing at you, sorry.
Yeah, a lot of lottery. So I'm going to be, I think, potentially hearing about 172 different things that money could go to, which all makes, again, Minnesota a better place to be and to have some fun things happen. So it's great to have a seat at the table. It's been wonderful to be mentored, not only by my colleagues, but just, other people, even in the Senate, we have a little thing, but it's been great. So excited to share with you later. Awesome.
Senator Drew Hagan.
Yeah, excuse me. Senator Glenn Gruenhagen. I'm District 17. Dawn is on half of it, and then I have Bobby Harder on the other half. So I have two nice ladies to keep me on the straight and narrow. Anyway, the committees I serve, well, first I'm married for 50 years. I got elected in 2010, and I love my wife. I have to say that because she told me to say it. And after 50 years, I learned what I have to do. But anyway, no, she's a wonderful lady, and I'm thankful I married her. But I serve on energy, housing, and also on HS, which has the 14 areas with the most fraud in it. Okay, so to say it was an interesting session is probably an understatement. The other thing
Glenn, what's HS?
Human services.
Thank you.
Yep. And you know, one of the things that let's put it this way. I started an independent insurance agency from scratch back in 1978. So it's developed into 3 agents and 3 secretaries and kind of 1,000 customers, but that's beside the point. So I'm in business for myself too. But here's the thing, I started selling health insurance in 1978, okay? The policy I sold had no pre-certification, no networks, is a $100 deductible, $75 a month, no matter how many children you had. If you had 10 children, you're still paying $75 a month.
Wow.
So something's gone wrong, in my opinion, okay? Because we are facing some problems in the healthcare industry. And I do have a bill that almost passed in the Senate. It was introduced in the House too, and it would reform your private health insurance, which we desperately need, in my opinion. And here's why, ladies and gentlemen. I was on a Zoom meeting with 4 CEOs of rural hospitals and 2 in the metro area, I think Hennepin County and one other one, about a year ago when Mary Cranky was there. And they all said the same thing. For every $2 of expenses, they get a $1 reimbursement from Medicaid and Minnesota Care. On Medicare, they get $1.50, so they still lose money, but not as much. On private insurance, they average about a $2.50 reimbursement for every $2 of expenses. So they actually make money. The problem is we're getting more and more government insurance, along with high deductibles that aren't being paid, and in many cases, and less private insurance. And you know, having been in the insurance industry this long, it used to be that the losses that government insurance had were cost shifted to the private insurance, which had the premium increases. Well, that's shrinking. So then we got the 340B program, which they're trying to make money on the drugs, okay? Because they're losing money on everything else. So we desperately need to reform the private health insurance. And again, I have a bill that would reduce your deductibles by about 20 to 30%. That's on a committee with active and retired doctors, and it would also reduce your premiums by about that much. So, and it would usurp the bureaucracy. So there is hope, but we do need all your participation in that. The last thing I'll just say on housing is, I was on the housing committee this year, and in Minnesota, to build the average house, and I got the map out in my car actually, it's about $560,000, okay, to build the average house in the state of Minnesota. If you build the same house in South Dakota, it's $200,000 less. I want you to think about that, okay? In fact, the 5 states around us, anywhere from $60,000 to $150,000 less to build the same house as we're building in Minnesota. Even Illinois is about $50,000 to $60,000 cheaper to build the same house, and Wisconsin also. So what you have to understand, state government, and it's been done on a bipartisan basis, okay, has artificially inflated the cost of our roads and bridges, of our electricity, of almost everything. And we can't keep going down this road without reforms, in my opinion, okay? Now, again, I'm trying to say this on a bipartisan basis, because if we go back far enough in history, there's blame on both sides, okay? But we can reform this. There is solutions, but if we keep going the direction we are, we're in for a lot of problems, in my opinion.
Thank you. You know, Glenn's touched on several things that we're going to get into more detail on, and he's kind of opened the window on that. But let's kind of talk about here, and all of you can chime in on this. By the way, I'm going to take a step back, and before we go on any further, this presentation was put together by the representatives, but we also have a guest here. Our legislative assistant for Senator Lang is Joy Orvis. So she's here also in the group, and she works in St. Paul and helping as a legislative assistant for I think Senator Lang and others as well. But I know we interact, and I appreciate the work you do down there. Also, the committee here, you know, is Janae Olson with the hospital, Shane Zeppelin with Vibrant Broadband and Meeker Energy, and Tim Erickson and Dina Winter with the chamber. So we're putting this all together. I needed to do that before I forgot at the end. All right, we're getting going here. So just talking about how things went. You know, I follow this, and a lot of people say I don't want to be involved in politics, and it's part of my job, and it's fun. But I didn't know whether to cry, stomp my feet, or you know, do what this session, because or laugh at y'all to tell you the truth. So you know, there's some interesting dynamics down there, and maybe you guys can just you know, not all of you have to comment, but if you want to, you know, we've got a DFL controlled Senate. A lot of things happen there and get passed, and then they don't get in the House. We got a tied House, and that was a huge controversy or an issue. A lot of drama last year with that. Obviously, a DFL controlled governor's office, and you know, and the word bipartisan keeps getting used, and of course, and it doesn't move. Nothing moves forward unless there is some in this type of tie. Nothing moves forward unless there's some bipartisanship in there. So, you know, I'd be, if one or all of you can comment on some of these things in overview. Senator Lang.
So there's a couple of things that aren't shown on the slide that, so after the election of 2024, the House came in at a tied vote. There was a lot of, and I should maybe let the House members talk about this eventually, but there was a lot of consternation where people, if you remember in the news, there were half the legislature didn't show up for
23 days.
23 days. So that's about how far behind we were when we got to the end of session. At the same time, the Senate was actually tied as well, 33-33, because of the death of Kerry Beatsing. So we entered the 2024 session tied in both the House and the Senate. That made me co-chair of the State Government Committee. I remained the senior member on that after a special election happened about I think we were about 60 days into session when that special election happened. So for about 6 weeks to 2 months, we had a tied Senate as well. The one seat majority has been, I've been in the Senate for 10 years, and we had a majority by 1 seat for 6 of those 10. That represents statewide of 3.5 million votes cast. There was a 161 vote margin between that 1 seat. So it is a very, believe it or not, Minnesota is a very purple state, right? Over the last 4 years, I would say oftentimes that isn't reflected in the legislation that comes out of Minnesota. How closely tied we actually are in elections. It tends to, you know, and part of it was almost a gift. All that, you know, very, without getting too partisan, it was very substantial legislation in 23 and 24 that actually came out of the legislature. Legislation that is life altering for a lot of Minnesotans in a positive or, as we've all experienced, sometimes a very negative way financially. That continued in the Senate after that special election. So I would say that knowing that they had the backstop of the House, some of the stuff that you saw that came out of the Senate both last year and this year after the special was still quite, you know, stuff that was clearly unconstitutional passed on the Senate floor. Stuff that was spending beyond our means and us having to raise taxes to meet the spending that came off the Senate floor, knowing full well that the House was going to stop it. If, you know, that is the truth of the way that politics really works, right? You placate to your base, you work for the people that are going to get you elected, but at the end of the day, you know that it's not going to become law because it would be so detrimental to the tax-paying public, in truth. So There is, you know, I worked under Governor Dayton. And at the time, I didn't really like the guy, but I really kind of miss him right now. He would never turn down a meeting. He would never tell you that he could do something and then would turn your back on you later. Over the last 8 years, I have not had the same experience. It's very hard to get in and talk to him, even if it's a nonpartisan issue that you need help on. It just doesn't get done. So it's been, the last 4 years in particular has been very, very tough in the legislature, even for very common sense laws or very common sense spending items that I wouldn't think would be a problem. I did not assume that this was going to be an issue because it wasn't in my first 4 or 5 years. So it's been a challenge when it comes to, we call it the three-legged stool because that's really what it is. But at the end of the day, and we'll get into some of this, I think the slides talk about what actually happened this session. But yeah, that's,
I'd love to share just really quick on the House piece of it. Last year, on this day, was our special session. So we had a 1-day special session that we had to go back to work to get things wrapped up. And we ended that special session with a lot of emotions. It was very challenging. There were some tough votes that our past Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman, had to make a vote, you know, for her party to pass to get the work done. And so we're coming up on her year anniversary of her and her husband's death on the 14th. So that has permanently changed like all of our lives, but when we're serving in the legislature and to see that political violence and to the capacity of what can happen and working alongside Senator John Hoffman, who survived, also him and his wife survived in that attack. But the impact of that and how it changes people and how it changes your work. So I still unapologetically you show up, but I'm just more cautious. I look around more. I mean, it is wild how that can affect you. So again, no matter what side of the aisle people are on, political violence has no place here. People should be able to agree to disagree. And we've seen things change. I've seen relationships change with friends and family that I never thought would happen from 2020 till now. So I got involved with politics because of Let Them Play Minnesota, a grassroots group to get kids back to playing sports and activities. But you watch how people can really dig their heels in. But that tie in the House has been a godsend. And again, you have to work together. And it's been, I've really, really enjoyed it. So it's been fun to be a stopgap. I've, just watched how we work down there, and it's been great. So we haven't mentioned lobbyists and stakeholders and activists, but they're also a part of our job. And so when people are coming down being the voice for their clients or their community, that also is another added bonus for us as legislators to be able to do the work along with our staff that we have. We have both nonpartisan staff and partisan staff that helps us understand all sides of the legislation that's coming forward. And for me, that's been invaluable in being able to represent District 17A.
I'll just follow up on Don's comment. 67, it's the first time that's happened in 50 years. So the House, it took a whole different dynamic. And as Senator Lang said, we started the year off in 25. Those first 3 weeks, the other side, the DFL did not show up in the House chamber. But for me, as a freshman new member of the legislature, that was actually, it gave me 3 weeks to kind of learn the ropes without actually being in the battle. And so that was very helpful. It was fascinating as the negotiation that took place between Melissa and Lisa and who was going to be the speaker and how committee structures were going to be run and all that kind of, we had to work together to make that happen. And obviously we did. Committees, there's 20 some committees in the House and in the Senate. And they're run by a Republican chair and a Democrat chair. And so they would share the gavel every other day. And so we'd hear one day we'd hear more DFL bills, when the DFL chair was at the gavel, and the next day it was a Republican chair, we'd hear more of the Republican bills. And so there was a lot of give and take. I think the 67, given what took place in the 20, a couple of years prior, with a lot of legislation that had been pushed through, these last 2 years, there hasn't been a lot of huge wins on either side, but maybe that's been an okay time, an okay break for Minnesotans. So now, obviously, that's going to change again in this next election in November, and the whole makeup of the House and Senate will obviously change again. So look forward to that. So.
Okay, yeah, just back to healthcare for a minute. I actually wrote a book on healthcare a few years ago. It's called, what is it called? It's called Healthcare in Crisis, Is the Government the Solution or the Problem? And I charge $5, it's on the internet, but I changed this year, I'm paying you $5 if you read it, okay? No, I need to update it, but it does have some solutions in there too. So the other thing I just say, follow up on Don's comment too about violence. I myself had a threat to be killed. It was in the Star Tribune. A guy up north, for some reason, didn't like me. I never met him. And he simply put on Facebook that he was going to kill me. And, my wife said, how much life insurance you got? No. No, but fortunately, my wife caught it. She's on Facebook quite a bit, Emily. And we reported it. And the thing is that the police did go and arrest him. And he was quite well armed. But that's another story. So that's kind of fizzled out. And he threatened Attorney General Ellison too. He's going to kill him. So he's bipartisan, whatever that's worth. But our founding fathers laid down political principles for us to solve our disagreements without violence. Okay, and I think all of us need to demonstrate that we can disagree on issues. That's part of the process that our founding fathers set up. But we have to understand the idea of doing harm to your physical harm to your opponent was not in the formula that they laid down. We have the right to vote, to participate, freedom of speech, and we need to practice that, regardless of what party that you're on. The last thing I'll just say about bipartisanship is that John Hoffman was my chair of the Human Services Committee. So I like John. He's easy to work with. We co-authored bills together. One of them that passed, actually, but that's another story. But I would say this, and this comes up quite a bit by people. I don't know if you have this question or not, but I'm going to answer it. Yeah. We had that 18 to $19 billion surplus a session ago. And people say, well, what happened to that? Well, first off, where did it come from? And you need to understand where it came from. It came from, the majority of it came from one-time money, $80 billion from the federal government for COVID. So the federal government sent $80 billion into Minnesota during COVID. That washed through the system, plus COVID came to an end, so the economy started recovering. That's how we got the $18 to $19 billion surplus. It's one-time money, most of it. The problem is we created ongoing expenses. So would you take one-time money and create ongoing expenses in your own finances? You wouldn't do that. But that's what we did. That's how we wound up with a $6 billion deficit, and we're still looking at deficits in the future. So we got to understand that government has to stay within its means, just like you do. And when you overspend, okay, you do more damage than good, because ultimately government is an expense of the private sector, and it drives the cost of everything up, and it hurts the low income the most. That's simply economic
That's
facts.
a good segue into the next topic on the overview, the things that were stopped, tax increases, mandates on schools, counties, car tab increases, and on this bill. Out of the four here, we'll go to the next topic about some of the wins that the legislative had, but we'll skip the tax increases and the car tab. But any comments on mandates on schools that and employers and counties and stuff, and the gun control on this? But we'll follow up on the tax increases and car tabs next one. So Glenn, you have anything on comment on the mandates since there were
Yeah.
stopped?
Last count, I think it was between, you heard several numbers. I wasn't on the education committee, but it's between 65 and 80 mandates onto our public schools. Okay, unfunded, most of them. And that just drives up the cost. And I've talked to superintendents in my district, and they just can't afford it. And that's why, even though we had historic funding, most of the school districts are broke. In fact, we just sat with Hutchinson, and they're hurting financially. And that's a growing district in most cases, a lot of ones with shrinking. So, I was on the school board for 16 years, and I did negotiations. And I saw how this worked, okay? And you cannot pass all these unfunded mandates, whether it's on the city, the county, or the state. In fact, we should have a law, in my opinion, that if the state mandates something and doesn't fund it, it should be optional to the school district, the city, or the county. Hey, we'll implement this if it works for us. If they aren't gonna fund it, I could sit, think about it. Coming up with ideas all the time, and it's gonna cost you money, you got nothing to say about it. Well, what's gonna happen? Your property tax is gonna go through the roof. So we really need to have a check and balance on the state passing unfunded mandates, regardless how well intended they are. Because ultimately, if they aren't funded, they can do more damage than good, which is what's happening in many of our school districts. So, and the last thing, the big beautiful bill that was passed at the federal had I think it's $1,750 credit for parents to use to spend on their child in the school, which a lot of schools would appreciate parents spending that money in their school district. The problem is the governor wouldn't approve it. The governor had to approve it. So there's it's multiple millions of dollars that was available to be spent into our school system, and we can't do it because for some reason there's an animosity at the Capitol in some areas to allowing parents to have funding to spend on the direction of their children. And I find that very disappointing because at a time where you pass all these unfunded mandates, and then on top of that, you could empower parents to help fund some of this stuff, it's not done. So we need everybody's participation, regardless of what political persuasion you are, and I'd sure appreciate if more of them agreed with me, Dave.
Who wants to take a shot at the gun on those?
How do you make that one nonpartisan? So the gun bill that came to the Senate floor, it never made it through the process in the House. And regardless of what you read online or all of the push and the yelling and shouting that happened in the state capitol at the end of session, the process would have been an extraordinary measure to get that to the House floor, something that I would not be comfortable with procedure-wise. If we do have a set of rules that we govern ourselves with, it would have been a very bad precedent to have that happen. We didn't, obviously in the Senate, they were going to hear the gun bill. The gun bill was very poorly written. It was if you were an anti-gun person, it is every wish list of things that came along with that. Right down to, warrantless seizure, confiscation. There were things in there that would have pretty much made it impossible for a high school track team to conduct the way they do business. It was very poorly written from the get-go. If you disagree with it fundamentally, it was an easy no vote. Constitutionally, it probably would not have stood even in the Minnesota Supreme Court up to the Constitution, because just of the way that it was. You talk Second Amendment issues, you talk Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, it would not have stood even in Minnesota. And maybe that was part of the design. I don't know, I wasn't in the room when it was written. There was a small portion of school safety funding that was included in it. I would have liked to vote for that. It was about 10% of what we had proposed. You know, I have a great background on school safety funding, where we've tried again and again bipartisanly to get a school safety bill passed. We actually have had school safety bills passed I think it was this 18-19 timeframe where we did an actual fairly robust school package that got dwindled down to about, again, a fifth of what we wanted. There was a lot of, you know, on the Senate floor, when the gun bill, we had 40 some amendments. We were going to spend days on this bill. And as a caucus, as a Republican caucus, we came together and said, you know what, let's not mess with this one. We did a simple no vote. We'll give them one option to pass the school safety funding and not do away with the gun stuff. And they all voted no. And that was it. It was about an hour and a half and we were done. We voted no on the bill. It died at that point, knowing full well that the House procedurally doesn't have the capacity to even bring it up on the floor. There was no real rule or reason for an urgency vote. I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about statistically.
This seemed like a topic, obviously, very contentious, and if you were only following the Facebook or social media and the news, you know, you heard one story, but if you listened and watched the floor, you know, what's happening in the House and knew the rules, the process, that it's got to go to committee, and it didn't pass committee. That's how everything happens. If you want a bicycle path and it doesn't pass in committee, it doesn't get to the floor, right?
You know, I had a
So this is just an issue where you really got to pay attention, I think, and that's the kind of the message today is, you know, who you're listening to and find out the facts.
So I had a good friend in the legislature when I was first elected that has since passed away, that was a Democrat from the Iron Range. And he once told me, anytime you legislate and you put into permanent black and white law in the state of Minnesota, both emotional feelings or a knee-jerk reaction to an event. This is what was going on, I mean, with the Annunciation shooting. And, you know, it's kind of a very strange situation, and it's a lot of pressure on top of legislators to take that in a quick reaction with the parents of the kids there. But also behind the scenes, I think the one thing that the public, for the most part, doesn't seem to know is that was not a unanimous stance from the Annunciation parents. There was parents behind the scenes that were contacting us to say, listen, we don't want to be made a political town. It is kind of disheartening when politicians, and I use that term specifically because I hate being called a politician. Yeah. I really do. I try hard not to be a politician. I try really hard to be a representative of this area. When you say things that sound like politicians, which is a lot of what was happening in this bill, you really do a disservice to your community and your constituency, in my opinion. And I really despise the media. I really do. And social media has put a little bit of a spin on that, maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way. But the things that were pushed down upon us, the names we were called, you know, it's like, and truthfully, when it came to that Annunciation shooting, this bill would have done nothing to stop it. Nothing. And that is really kind of the crux of the issue is if this was to pass the House and the Senate, first of all, even if it doesn't go, here's the thing, everything we pass happens July 1st, right? July 1st this year, all the laws that we pass become actual statute. They are implemented. If this would have passed, the Supreme Court never would have had a chance to hear it before it actually became law. That would have stopped none of the school shootings that we've seen over the last decade. It wouldn't have touched any of that. Not a one. And that is a problem where if your legislature is taking action and being that that far off base when it comes to not only intent, but, follow through and what it actually means to your constituency, that's an issue. So it was a very, and to back up a second, we saw a lot of that happen in 23 and 24 when it was one party control. It had far ranging implications to folks well beyond that 23, 24 timeframes.
That gun legislation was very, just so you know, it was very partisan. And if the House wouldn't have been tied at 67-67, I believe it's likely that.
It wouldn't have, I don't think they would have.
No, they had most of the votes, did they? To pass it out of the Senate.
It could have happened, this gun bill could have passed in 23 and 24.
Maybe not this year.
And they chose not to. There's a reason.
So maybe it was more of a marketing push.
Probably more to come on that one.
Yeah.
It's probably not over.
No, we can just keep rolling. All right, keep rolling.
So
I think we
let's
should keep
talk
going.
about some of the legislative wins and, and so when we were putting this together and they said, well, who's gonna moderate? I said, I will, because then I can say what I want a little bit. So anyway, I could, I look at these legislative wins, 250 million, and then in the tab fees revert to 2022 and fraud prevention, and they're all great positive points, and I don't need to be a Debbie Downer, but I mean, 250 million folks, that's nothing, come on here, guys, ladies and gentlemen, we need more, and I'm gonna hopefully, I don't want to offend anybody, I'll try to say what people are thinking, maybe, right, and I'm okay with that. And then the fraud prevention. I mean, so we have 250 million, you use the M word, the million. But then, boy, they're throwing around the billions when it comes to the fraud, and we ain't gonna get none of that back, all right? And I'm tired of that. And so yeah, we've got some wins here, legislators, but, why can, it's 250 million, and how can we change that?
The wins clearly weren't big enough. You're right, 250 million sounds like a lot, but when you spread it out over the whole state, it's very little. House Republicans did have an initiative of a $4 billion tax plan to give $4 billion back to the people of this state. And obviously that didn't, we tried, that did not happen because of politics. We are the 7th highest tax state in the nation. And it's crushing small business, it's crushing families all across Minnesota. I am greatly concerned about the competitiveness of Minnesota and the competitiveness of small businesses, but also the competitiveness of moms and dads raising a family no matter where they're working. If they are overtaxed, overregulated, it is really hard to survive. And when you look at the other states around Minnesota, you go to South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, all those tax environments are different. And they're better. And that's what makes it tough in Minnesota. I am, because of the nature of my business and my background and understanding numbers, I am clearly dialed into the tax issues here in Minnesota. I'm concerned about that. I just, before I turn it over to the rest here, I just want to talk about the fraud piece. When I went back to the session this year, I said, in my opinion, the number one thing we should focus on is fraud. When you think about $9-10 billion that have disappeared and how it disappeared, one of the tools that we implemented was an inspector general office, and that took us 2 years, and it doesn't to actually form this office that's going to watch how your tax dollars are spent. We know a lot of the fraud happens in the Department of Human Services. But as a lot of these agencies, they do have checks and balances of how that money is being spent, but the checks and balances just weren't taking place. And I say it happens at the top. Whoever is the leader, if it's a business, the person at the top takes the heat. And one thing that I'm happy that we did, it frustrates me that we've had to do this, and it's this Office of Inspector General. And a couple things it's gonna do, because a lot of people say, how come there isn't an arrest? What is going on? It's gonna create some teeth. It's an independent office, and the governor's office did not want this to be an independent inspector general. They wanted to have more authority, more control. Republicans stood very strong. We were like, hey, we're not gonna create this office if it's gonna be meshed in with the rest of state government. It needs to be a standalone deal. And so that office is gonna be standing alone. And the other piece that we felt was important, that if there's bad actors that are performing and doing bad things, we want to be able to prosecute them. And so it took us 2 years. We had several votes on this particular bill. It passed the Senate a year and a half ago by kind of on a real broad measure. It got to the House and it fell along party lines, I think, 3 times. And finally, we got it over the line at one of the last bills at the end of this session. This office will not kick in until the beginning of 28, I think, right?
Yep.
28.
It's that one.
So, I mean, I think it should be immediate, but this is the best that we could do. At least we've got this in place.
We gotta find-
I care, and I am focused in on the people's money. And I just want to make sure that if we're spending money on different programs, that it's getting used to the most effective way possible. And so I think this is a good first step as we progress into this. So I'm happy that is one piece of legislation that we all, and it did finally pass on a bipartisan basis.
I'll just speak really quick on the fraud prevention piece, the tech modernization for counties. Not all of you might not know what that means, but we are one of 10 states in the nation that still has counties do eligibility for our folks in human services. It's a big, big job. And the DOS system, the green screens, if you've ever remember using that back in the 80s, we still use that. So there may not be fraud happening in all human services areas. It literally could be waste, or it could be just an abuse or an error that happens. It could be just the way things are, and then systems don't communicate with other systems. So we are super pumped, over the moon. We should have a party and celebrate in the streets, because IT modernization is gonna happen in the state of Minnesota. So we believe that that's gonna help not only just our counties that help provide the services, we believe it's gonna help just with the morale, help with, if let's say Sherry is out of the office, everybody knows Sherry's out of the office because there's nobody that knows how to do what she does. And so that piece was so vital and so important. And I brought it up in any situation and every situation. I wonder if I even talked about it in environment at one point. Because we needed to I got a tattoo, system, no. IT, no. But it is gonna be so great. It is going to cut down on things that were just, again, there's the loopholes, there's human error, there's all kinds of things, but folks, have you figured out how to placate and just play on the heartstrings of folks? So that was a huge one. I think it's gonna be great. And again, 100% tax on fraudsters. Why not?
I was just gonna jump
go
on
for
that
it.
one. So this is one, or beginning of session, it was one of those bills where I saw it, and it's like a paragraph long. Anybody convicted of fraud of the government is subject to 100% tax on the amount of money that you were convicted of stealing. Which, yeah, it sounds fine, but it's one of those bills when you first read it, you're like, yeah, sure, whatever. Probably not gonna happen. Over the course of the session, we saw several of these fraudsters that have been convicted go through the court system. I think one was $7 million, one was $2.5 million, in their pockets, convicted, and they got a $750 fine, or they were released on their own recognizance. Now, believe it or not, the legislature, although I'm really, well, no, maybe not, but we don't have a law enforcement, right? We spend money, make policy, and we have the Office of Legislative Auditor that can look at things, after the fact. And then they just report back to us. That's even our subpoena authority is rather mundane. People don't need to show up because there's a sergeant of arms that is on the Senate floor, doesn't go to their house and grab them. We don't have that authority. So what do we have? We have the power to tax fraudsters, right? We're gonna weaponize the tax system in this case because we're not, and this was a bipartisan thing. This was Democrats in the Senate saying, we'll hear that bill. We're good with that. We're like, really? Okay. At the end of it, it was a very bipartisan bill that passed and said, no, we want to recoup some of this money. If you're found guilty, fraud, you have a $5 million home, the Minnesota Department of Revenue is going to come after that. You're going to have a big tax bill. And that makes sense to everybody all of a sudden. So.
Property is easy to claw back. The cash, it's hard to find that, obviously.
Glenn?
Yeah, I think on fraud and the taxation, I'll just make a quick comment. One of the things you got to understand, when you're not competitive with your tax rates, you actually drive productive people out of your state. I have an independent insurance agency, like I said, I had a good friend. He owned a business by Norwood out on a farm. He had a patent. They sold their product all over the United States. He kind of semi-retired, his boys took over. They sat down with their tax accountant in January of 2024, okay? The boys did. And they figured in the next 10 years, if they moved to South Dakota versus Minnesota, how much they would save in taxation for personal taxes, property taxes, business taxes, et cetera, et cetera. The tax accountant said he estimated $12 million, okay? So guess what? And these people were all customers of mine. They sold their business, they took everything, and they're in South Dakota. Their houses, everything. Is that helping our tax revenue, ladies and gentlemen? No. It's not. We're driving out the successful and we're drawing in the dependent. The other thing I would just add, lower competitive taxes grows the private sector and you get more tax revenue. And you don't have to believe me, Minnesota Management Budget, and I still got a copy of the statement, every quarter sends out a report. In 2014, they sent out a report, Minnesota Management Budget, to the legislature. And they said the gas tax, the price of gas had dropped, and it was equal to a tax cut for the average family. The average family had over $900 more to spend than they did before. And guess what? We had a $2 billion surplus that year. And MMB contributed a large percentage of the surplus to the lower gas price tax cut to the families. So when you have competitive tax rates, you're going to grow the private sector and you're going to generate more tax revenue. It's an inverse relationship. Think about that. Constantly raising taxes, as we've seen in other states or Minnesota. United Healthcare just announced they're moving 2,000 of their employees, their IT people, out of the state of Minnesota to Kentucky. Good paying jobs that pay good tax revenue. We're in a crisis, ladies and gentlemen. We can't keep raising taxes. I'm sorry I get passionate about this, but I pay taxes. And you're sick of it being wasted, and you're sick of it seeing good, solid businesses leave this state. Okay, other than that, I don't have an opinion. Okay, quickly on fraud, okay? The one bill I got passed was a fraud bill. Here's what you need to understand. In 2017 and before, the Department of Human Services, where the 14 frauds are, they used to give a report voluntarily to the legislature. And they would report how much fraud they found, how many people they served, and what the growth was to both the House and the Senate. In 2018, guess what? They quit doing it because it was voluntary. Now, it just happened to be the same year Governor Walz got elected, by a coincidence. Okay, I put in a bill to mandate that they put that report. And here's why it's important. Because we could see, if we got a report every year, how much these agencies were exploding in cost. Now, I'll just give you autism. I have a autistic nephew. We want to help autistic children, okay? We want to do that, all right? Well, in 2017, the cost per autistic child was $6,500. By 2023, it had exploded to $45,000 per child. So in 6 years, it went from 6,500 to 45,000. On top of that, in 2017, I just did a video, you can find it on the internet, if you don't mind listening to me. But in 2017, we had 10 providers in the state for autistic children. By 2025, we had 425, and many of them were fraudulent. If we had that report, we would have caught that. By not having the report, so I think it's one of the most important fraud preventions, so that we know what's going on in these agencies. And it was stopped. And I don't know why, but the good news, it got signed into law, okay? And I'm very thankful. I think it's the first step, because the other one doesn't kick in until 2028, plus it has to be funded yet. But it's the first step in trying to catch the fraud, so the legislature actually sees what's going on. Okay.
So, you know, I want to make a comment on the tax or the tab fees. You know, I was hoping that we could kind of name one of you Jesse Ventura here, you know, to bring
Let's
us
go back to that.
If you go way back, you remember Jesse Ventura got
98, 99.
98, 99, a long time ago, but, you know, this is maybe, this was a little bit of a few pennies back in our pocket, but
We do have one of the highest
Yeah.
car tab fees in the entire,
The highest.
I thought we were number two, we're number one. You know, and as you look at, and again, you compare to our neighboring states, and I think it's important to do that because people are mobile and they're moving around all the time. You know, our rates are 600% higher in Minnesota or more, 600 to 700% higher than in South Dakota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota. And so, and tell you, that's a piece that has immediate impact on people. Plus then you add, we've got some of the highest income tax, some of the highest corporate tax, and an estate tax issue that, you know, I call it, farmers calling all the time, and business people, that is extremely crippling, and as they're trying to figure out what their next steps are. We make it so difficult in Minnesota, and I just believe there's a better way. So,
Amen. Hey, just a quick comment I was on a football team with North Dakota College with Jesse Ventura. He never did like me.
So we talked about healthcare. Glenn has talked about it quite a bit already here this morning and afternoon. And I, again, thank you to the Lincoln Memorial Hospital for hosting us this room. You know, and I have to say how lucky we are to be in a community like this. I moved here from St. Cloud area in 2014. December 16th, I left knee replacement upstairs, and then you know, the operating here, and then I spent a lot of physical therapy to the floor right above us. Okay, lots and lots of physical therapy because of the issues. But anyways, I feel very thankful to have to drive a few blocks, you know, in a town like ours, and not have to run to St. Cloud or Wilmot or Hutchinson to have this hospital here. So we're pretty darn lucky, you know, and people come all around. But as Senator Gruenhagen said, healthcare costs are excruciating, and they're limiting some of the services hospitals can have, and of course, you know, all of this goes down to the insurance companies are making the money, but we're all paying for it. So, you know, there was some of the issues that came up I thought the very last minute, but you know, the kind of the 205 million for the Hennepin County Medical Center that kind of bailed them out, I guess, if that's the right way to say it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
well, there's a little more money that's actually going to them. It's not just 205 million. There's another reserve fund of another 550 million too. So that's there's more to it than that. One of the concerns, and I'm sure Mary is well aware of, HCMC and the organization itself is how it's been run. It's not been properly run for a number of years, and and we've seen that as evidence of where they are financially. And one piece that is, and this is something I have argued for, we need some people that really understand on that board that understand how to run a hospital. And that part of the legislation that was passed, that piece is in there. And so I am hopeful that and this is something I'm going to be watching. I want to make sure people that know how to run hospitals are actually on that board, because I believe that the people that were on the old board, they didn't understand, they didn't know how to run a hospital. And so it's a piece that because I believe this issue is not over. I know 205 million sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but it's not over. And, but I think it can be with the right people in place. So it's a really important piece. And
I'm actually, can I just say something really quick about the Medicaid work requirement and eligibility verification? Again, that piece had to happen in order for us to capture federal dollars. When I first got into the legislature and I saw the pie chart, that 54% of our budget in human services comes from where? The federal government. So if we did not have conformity to OB3, Obi-Wan Kenobi, if we did not have conformity to what the feds are asking for work requirements and eligibility things, and have those things done, we would lose 3.5 billion with a B this go around, and then the following year it could be over $5 billion. And so, again, is it the perfect bill to have in an omnibus bill? I voted for both health and the human service omnibus bill, because there was very good things that had to happen in it in order for us to capture the federal dollars that are coming in, and also excited for our nursing homes that we were able to get that done too, the wages that actually directly go back to the workers, people doing the work for it. So I was grateful for that too, so.
Yeah, I'll jump on the HCMC, working in EMS myself. So the thing to understand about HCMC is what role HCMC really plays in the statewide healthcare system. Right? Not only are they located in some of the most impoverished communities, so they're walk off the street folks that come into the community are challenged financially. Right? So they're uncompensated care is very expensive on an annual basis just to begin with. They are also a destination hospital for EMS transfers throughout the state. One of the biggest transfers, I know Litchfield is oftentimes head of a county, or Abbott, or all of those metro hospitals. So they have a workload that does not represent the reimbursement rate. So the reimbursement rate is oftentimes a lot less than even what a rural hospital is. All that being said, some of their financial decisions. So I've had several meetings with folks from HCMC. Over the course of those meetings, it was the initial meeting where they said, hey, we need $50 million just not to go under this year. That was late in the session. It came to us late. We didn't have a whole lot of time. I said, that's fine. What are you doing to combat, where your dollars are being spent? It took a little bit of effort to get that out. When they finally, turned over their financials to the state, I kind of told them, be careful what you wish for. Yeah. In all honesty, because now you're going to get a bailout from the state. You are subject to not only the new OIG office that we just created and signed into law, you're subject to the Office of Legislative Auditor. So you're going to have people all over looking at how you're spending your dollars. On top of all that, you now have 201 legislators that have the ability to look up what you're doing. It isn't in a vacuum anymore. So what you saw happen was the board that ran the hospital had more or less been disbanded, and the county had taken control. I think that was a good move on their part. Some of the spending that HCMC was doing, discretionary spending, was questionable. Questionable when you're $50 million in the hole on your very basic fundamental spending. Why are you spending money on these other areas that, whether you deem valuable or not, are not part of your core function? It doesn't make sense. You need to, if it comes to paying the electric bill or paying for a retreat for your administrators, I think you know how to make that choice, and that choice wasn't being made. There are some names that have been put on this not regulatory, but operational board that the actually sure the title of the board is, that are well known throughout the state of Minnesota as far as not only knowing medical policy and operations of a hospital, but financially speaking, are good folks to have around. So the 500 million critical care access hospitals, that's our rural hospital. That was all part of the package. That is Meeker County. That is a bunch of hospitals throughout our region. So that is a good package. It's a one-time fix. It is a get your ducks in a row and make sure that you know what you're doing, because we're not going to give you that stadium tax ongoing. We're just not going to do it. It's unsustainable. Run your business the way you know how to run it. If you don't know how to run it, find someone that does. And that's, and truth of it is, HDMC cannot fail. That's the truth. It is. It's a part of the backbone of our system of healthcare and EMS, and you name it. They work with other regional hospitals all throughout the country.
I mean, so many residents, that's where they do their residency. That's where we're getting some of our doctors.
Yeah, if you want critical care and an ER, that's where you're going to get your experience. That's where when we get our rural Minnesota ER docs, they got some experience in HCMC. They're a tier above. So.
Senator Gruhan?
Yeah, one of the things I want to bring in, we probably brought you a few concerns, okay? But I do want to, listen, one of the reasons I'm running in the legislature, we can solve these problems. I'm convinced 150%, but we have to do some reforms. We cannot continue to go down the path that we have, okay? We have to reform the system, empower the patient, and shrink the bureaucracy that's micromanaging the doctor, the patient, and costing billions of dollars, state, federal, state and federal, all the way down. So I just want to leave you with hope. All of the problems we talked about are solvable, okay? But not if we continue like we have. And we need your participation. The one thing I'll touch on that comes up every year, are there any nurses in the audience? Okay, I'm not going to talk then. No, there's a ratio bill that comes out that is pushed by the some of the nurse organizations. And what that is where the nurse can only have so many patients. As far as their condition isn't brought up, nothing, it's just a ratio. So technically, you could show up at the emergency room, you would need to go into the hospital, and yet if the ratio was such that the nurse had 5 patients to watch, even though they had empty beds, they wouldn't let you in. It's right at the doorstep, okay? There's key people in political positions down there, influential, that support this. It comes up every year. I know nurses are being stretched to the limit, but a big part of that is, number one, the money we waste. Number two, the bureaucracy that takes money out, state and federal, that takes money out of the healthcare system. And then you have administrators trying to stretch their nurse employees in a way that stresses them out. I've heard the testimonies of these nurses. They're trying to do 6 different things and they can be sued and everything else. And they say, all I get is more and more assignments and I just can't do it all. That's why they're favoring this. We need to address the bureaucracy, which exploded under Obamacare, federal, state. And then the state and the insurance companies exploded their bureaucracy to deal with the state and federal bureaucracy.
So moving into that, maybe this is the next topic of bureaucracy a little bit here. It's looked like a good plan for small businesses and people to be able to spend time with their family, different things, moving that, but then it was kind of one of those areas where the practice was one way and then the law was kind of caught up with how the reality was.
Yeah.
And so who can talk about that?
Yeah, take a crack at this. We might just say a little something on it, but we can get to what we've done.
So, paid family leave. This is I think the easiest way to think about it is is a fundamental transformation of how employees and employers, their relationship. And it's putting the government in between. Now, the bill itself, honestly, probably should have taken 5 years of legislative work to do, and we did it in 2.5 months. I don't even remember how many pages. It was like 5,000 or 6,000 pages long, this bill is. It's a massive piece of legislation. That being said, whether you agree with it or not, it is a substantial burden on businesses or sole proprietorships for that matter. And truthfully, it's so generous in the state of Minnesota. We're so generous about the amount of time off, the amount of money you can get, the leniency on how it's applied. You can do paid family leave, and meanwhile, you can take PTO, you can do your, what's the federal Family Medical Leave Act. You can triple dip on this program and make more money while you're on leave. There are no rules or regulations about having a secondary job while you're on paid. This is I hate playing the devil's advocate because that's what we do in St. Paul oftentimes is you go, how is somebody going to scam the system? How easy, I've always told employers, this is a great severance package when you leave a job and go someplace else. All that being said, it's a 0.88% tax. It doesn't sound that much. That 0.88% pays for approximately 120,000 Minnesotans to be on this program annually. That is a very outdated timeframe. The 50,000 applications, we're knocking on 100 right now. The problem with that is that costs $1.2 billion annually. At the same time that they were thinking that this 0.88%, this is Department of Revenue, right? This is the people putting this together that really have a tough time with math, even though they're all mathematicians. The problem with that is they figured about 5% of the businesses throughout the state of Minnesota were going to go secondary market to meet the guidelines. It's closer to 25%. They said, we're not going to do, I don't care if it costs me the same money, I'm not dealing with the state, we're going secondary market. The applications are well above their forecasted state. So it's close to, put it this way, by 6 months into the program, we're probably going to expend our annual, we're going to expend the money that's in the account. So the issue with that is that the Health and Human, or the Paid Family Medical Leave agency that now exists is starting denying people. Amen. Which really kind of irritates me if we're going to have this very, very generous, very robust system that's doing this program up to 22 weeks. At least you allow the eligible people to use it, but we're going away from that. So as you can see already in March there, the number of denials on this from probably, well within the limits of acceptable folks that are applying have been denied. The truth of it is, I think there's, on both sides of the aisle, there are people that are already trying to, in my viewpoint, this is a big turd. This is a big turd. People are trying to polish it. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, if you want me to touch this bill, there's 2 things I would do. Don't touch the program. Leave the program alone, right? But you make it optional. And you take the cap off that 0.88% that we really tried hard to get attached to it. That does 2 things. It allows employees to see what it actually cost. The state will not supplement this at 1.2 billion because we don't got the money to do it. The tax isn't going to cover it. So you pay full boat, and so you see what it is on your paycheck, and then make it optional.
It's the most progressive paid family medical leave law in the nation. And, there was lots of bills floating around. I was on 2 of them. One was a delay. I would have liked to seen, I was on the repeal, but I was also on the delay bill. And at least give us a little more time. I think we implemented this too quickly. There is a lot of confusion. It's 20 some weeks of time off. It doesn't just affect small business. This affects anybody that employs people, the county, the hospital, everybody is in the same boat. If you employ people, everybody's can reach into this paid family medical leave bucket. I'm exceptionally worried about the farmer, the small business owner in rural Minnesota that is already bombarded with all the rules and all the regulations of our state government. And then you add this on to the top. And as we're stretching and trying to find help and employees, you know, like I said, I'm a small business owner too. And you know, I think this is, I'm concerned about what potential fraud there's going to be in this area. I'm hopeful that we can make some significant changes. But I'm gonna tell you, we tried this year, and this was a absolute no-go. The other side would have, I mean, this is a priority of the governor. And this is gonna have an effect as time clicks on, as people get, and as this becomes more familiar, this is gonna have a real impact on our state.
And I'll just say really quick, it's a big barrier between the employee and the employer, that relationship, working with HR, you know, understanding what's going on with your employees. Some, you know, again, have been put on hold forever trying to get help. I was just talking with a big manufacturing company over in Hutchinson when I was at Dairy Days after getting done milking a cow. And it was wild to talk to the HR, and this is a big company, but they said what their employees are having to do now is, before it would take days, or by the end of the week or the following week, they would have their checks. They would know exactly what they were going to get to the T. They had that relationship and they banked their time, or they did whatever they did, but it was very clockwork. Now 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and maybe still don't have their money. And they're having to go get loans, which has interest rates. So the affordability piece of it, if you look to how is it affordable and how is that a benefit for you as an employee or an employer, they're finding major issues with it. And this is a big, again, this is a big company. And again, I've had folks that own like a lawn care service. I mean, she was on the phone just crying with me going, that's my whole season. 20 weeks is like less than my season. And at any given time, it could be that day, it could be that week, they could be gone. And they have to figure out how to find that other employee. So it did not matter. We were up till the sun came up when this finally hit the House floor, just debating and giving every kind of scenario you can imagine. And it did not matter. And so that's where I will say, that was difficult, as you know, because I could see your faces. I'm an employee. It's not just to help, you know, employers become richer, but that's a good thing, I think, too, because it helps the economy of our state. So we're going to see changes with this, I hope, you know, but there was no changes this session, and we'll see what happens. Sometimes we have to sit with things, and even when they fail, then we have to figure out how to change things up.
I think I think it's just how big this program is and how progressive it is. I think all of us up here, we understand with moms and having babies and those kinds of things. Of course, we want them to have time and to be at home and those things. This is spread so much further, this law.
And the definition of family,
yes.
You know, a family member is not defined.
Yeah, not this session, last session when it actually passed, I was on, or maybe it was the previous session, I was on the labor committee. So the other thing that's in that law is if the employer questions or says, well, why do you want to take time off? The employee can file a civil lawsuit up to $10,000. So I called the bill a trial lawyer full employment bill. That's basically what it amounted to. The second thing is, I have a niece who works for Rochester Mayo Clinic, okay? And she has MS, so she does need to take some time off every once in a while. So in the past, she'd contact the HR department or whatever, and they'd give her the paid leave off, no problem. Now, she had to apply to the state. And guess what? You know, they talked about the delay. Her first application was denied, right? She couldn't get paid. So she's sitting there with a small family, husband, and again, she she called and complained and said, hey, I used to just go up to my employer, Rochester Mail, boom, it was just done and I got the paycheck. Said now I'm being denied and I have MS and they're not doing it. So again, when government does a one size fits all, you have a ripple effect of negative things that happen. By the way, they had to hire minimum, they probably hired more now. They had a minimum of 400 full-time employees to start implementing this. 400 more state employees. Now we're already bloated for state employees compared to all our neighboring states, both local and state. And so we really need to modify this. You're better off working with your employer. I used to negotiate it with the certified staff when I was on the school board. That's where it belongs. It doesn't belong with the state, one size fits all, and then get denied. And the reason they're denying is because the applications are exploding. Last comment, I talked to the superintendent of Eastern Carver School, K-12 public schools. I represent a part of Carver County. And he said, got 700 full-time employee teachers. Some of them are taking 2 weeks on with the students and 2 weeks off. And you can't question them. So it's affecting the education of our children, and then they can't get the subs to be in the classroom. In fact, the superintendent in Glencoe Silver Lake told me, kids are gonna go into the classroom and they're just gonna have a computer screen what their assignment is. There's gonna be no teacher because I can't get the subs to fill this out. That's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. We need your participation, okay? We've got to modify this. All right.
Good, well, thank you. So in the interest of time, I want to allow plenty of time for questions and answers. Some of you did submit some questions. We've covered them and really in healthcare and education. But is there any questions that anybody that you heard here that you'd like to ask the panel here at this time? Anybody have something?
It's gotta be one.
There's got to be one. I'll bet you some of you have comments, but I'm asking.
We must have covered it.
So some of the things is, how about this is maybe it's a procedural thing and, to help us understand the omnibus bills. Boy, it's just a pot full of everything. And, we would prefer single item bills, single issue bills out there. And so many of those things, this is one of the questions, is that they all get mixed in there. And then, I know that I've talked to all of you at some point in time or other legislators, and because of one issue in there, they might support many of the issues in that bill, but because of a couple of them, they say no, so help us through that confusion.
Well, so omnibus bill, right? That has become the big no nasty word that comes out of the legislature. Minnesota has a constitution that says single subject bills. And I would say in the last 2 years, we've actually done a pretty decent job of getting back to that. Especially this year. Part of it was you needed someone to cross in the House, you needed someone to cross the aisle for the bill. In the past, this is, the thing about an omnibus bill is it is a useful tool to get, for example, I was the Veterans Chair for 4 years. The veterans had never had an omnibus bill. You never had a Veterans Day on the floor to pass all veterans bill and all veterans bills. That is the way an omnibus is supposed to work. All the veterans bills are put into one bill, and then they can be amended on the floor, they can be amended in committee. That's the way it's supposed to work. What you saw in 2024 was it had 6 pages of title in an effort to be constitutional. And it was 2,000 pages long. It was given to us at about 11:20 on Sunday evening. We needed to be done by midnight. That is what should not happen. And actually right now, that's a case that's going to be presented to the Supreme Court in the state of Minnesota for everything that we did in 2024, maybe null and void, which.
Paid time medical leave.
Yeah. So that is the, it's, my guess is the Minnesota Supreme Court will do what they always do and say, you guys need to follow the law. I don't know, this one they might have to make a judgment on just because of the way it's been presented. But yeah, omnibus bills should be just that, single subject bills, just like our very narrow actual single subject bills. So it had, both sides have done it. it'll be interesting to see what the Supreme Court says. It may kind of have a little bit of guiding light to the future legislatures of Minnesota as we go forward and say, yeah, you can't do that anymore, because guess what? It's going to be nullified when it goes to the Supreme Court, and that's probably a good place for the legislature to be. The same goes for supermajorities and, what we call grandstanding or doing some sort of a filibuster on the floor. Having, like a bonding bill, for example, needs a supermajority, so you need to have a bill that, which is a good thing in
I think
my
it's great.
viewpoint. Where you have to have guys from both sides of the aisle say, yeah, this is a good bill.
Guys and gals.
Guys, but yeah, that's,
I have a question. So I'm advocating for my clients. I'm a Medicare and health care agent.
Mhm.
And so it's really disheartening for me to hear some of my client stories. One of my clients, he's been on 2 medications. The medications have been out there for over 35 years and they were dropped. And the alternatives, he could not go on those because they put him in the hospital. So what am I supposed to tell?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to tell my client that because, these medications and the new drugs and generics are entering the market, that his current medication has been knocked off, pricing or contract adjustments with manufacturers are knocking his medication off. He can't afford it, and he might die because he cannot afford this medication. It's no longer available to him.
the
What
brand
then-
name,
Pardon?
the brand name is it?
There is only one kind of the specific drug.
And there's
so
not
it's-
a generic, or you said there
It
is
is a generic.
Okay.
But
I
yeah,
get-
there's 2 of them. I mean, they've been out there for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're knocked off. And now there's no other,
Okay, I can answer that
Prescription
because I sell
works
Medicare
for him.
supplements and Part D drug program.
and
I have the same thing happen to some of my clients, just what you were saying. And what you have these PBMs, okay? Like, is it Opus? And, United Healthcare, I think, it's CVS. They create Optimum, that's what it is. I picketed them, by the way, over this, with a bunch of independent druggists. See, what you have a formulary system. And the PBMs decide what drugs go on the formulary. And the corruption is, and the allegation is, and I believe it's proven, and they're even trying to address it at the federal level, is the PBMs will put the drugs on the formulary, which is what you can use, based on the rebates they get from the manufacturer. That's the catch. The rebates are not going to the pharmacy, they're not going to the patient, they're going to the PBMs who are making millions. The PBMs do not manufacture the product, they do not sell the product, they're a middleman, and they are corrupt to the core, okay? And the PBMs got legislation through under Obamacare that empowered them to do this, all right? Read my book. And this has to be stopped, all right? Because we're no longer putting drugs on the formulary for the best for the patient and what the doctor thinks is best. We're putting it on there based on the rebate that the PBMs get, and they're making millions. And all they are is a middleman. We can solve this, but people have to understand. There's even a website that deals with this, put out by the independent druggist, one of which is in my district, Deb Kevany over in Winston. Her husband's in your district, I think, right? And she educated me a lot on this. We've had legislation, I've had legislation to address this, but there's, the problem is when you empower these organizations with millions of dollars, they go down to the legislature and they fill people's pockets and they bottle up legislation that could help all of us. It can be solved, but we have to understand the problem. The PBMs under Obamacare had their powers expanded. That's got to change. And it's even to the point where we're killing patients because they're not getting the medication they got.
that's right.
Okay, I could go on, but I think you get the idea.
So again,
Thanks.
anything for my client,
Yeah.
I mean, in this position where he can't
He has to,
afford
the
it,
doctor has to file an appeal.
I mean,
The doctor has to file an appeal.
but in the meanwhile,
In the meanwhile,
He
he's
can't
sitting
afford it.
there. I know.
he ends up in the hospital, which causes, thousands and thousands and more dollars.
Okay, in my agency, I got about 1,000 Medicare supplements, okay? I see this happen all the time. They come in crying, all right? And, I can't get this drug. And then they can't afford the other one. Well, then I help them fill out the paperwork through the, what's the name of that? Through a state agency to help that connects them to the drug maker to help them pay for that. And but that takes a month and a half too. But I don't know why I can't remember the name, but anyway, the point is there is a solution, but it drags out. And you gotta have the doctor get involved and make an appeal on that, okay?
There was one question about, kind of related to healthcare and education. Here's the question: the designation of nurses and therapists as professionals has been recently removed by the Federal Department of Education. And so this limits those professions in obtaining grants and financing for loans. The question, the person asking says, we'd like to have redesignation of these occupations to be healthcare professionals. I don't think this is a state thing necessarily, but is there anything in Minnesota here that can provide some help to that? You know, that
We've done a lot with that. I was on a lot of scope bills, and then also there's some loan forgiveness. Again, rural is really great about figuring out ways that we can get professionals out here and then capture, help them with their. So I would just say, advocating, to the person if they're online or watching this or want to know what the answer is, federally, we can talk to our Congress folks, and we do. And I've got their phone numbers. and just trying to seek to understand, and then just understand what the impacts are. Today, there was a meeting between CMS and our Minnesota DHS. And I gave them a bunch of questions and said, we have to have a full understanding about, this is with revalidation, So there's lots of different ways. And so I'd encourage people to advocate, their Congress folks, talk to their state reps or their senators, and then we can collectively go together if they've got a bill idea, if they've got ideas, even though it doesn't impact, it doesn't necessarily, we didn't bring the bill. We have access just like any of us do because they serve us in Washington. So it does require a lot of folks taking time and energy to bring their voice
so
forward.
Minnesota does have a healthcare loan forgiveness program for those
In certain
professionals?
professions, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
So
in
they need
certain
to,
professions.
we need to advocate for that.
But that only works if you can get the loan.
Correct,
I mean, it's only after the fact. So
Correct. correct.
That wasn't my question, but
No, thank you for that.
Here's another topic, it's a can of worms, is, housing in here, and I know, I traveled down to Prior Lake visiting a daughter and grandson there quite often, and I go through Carver County and take that way, and wow, those part of, it's like a wall. Building houses and developments like crazy in Carver County and Shakopee and Savage in that area, and you come out here and it's like, wow, you can tell you're in rural Minnesota, because everything stops. There's not much building. And then we expect people to come out and work in our communities, right? We're looking for the workforce. There's no place to live. Not even decent renting houses out here for rent, And what can be done with this?
I'm on the housing committee this year, so I think since 2012, Commissioner Bowl is the name. They spent over $2 billion on housing. I made the comment in housing, in those trailer houses that, what do you call them?
Modular,
Yeah, modular homes,
manufactured.
in rent, everything. They've been in business since agency since 1971. Everything they're doing is going in the wrong direction. Everything's getting worse. Fewer houses, rent's going up. I mean, everything's getting worse. There were like 7 things they were doing. I said, you know what? If you were a private business, I think you'd be out of business. In fact, I think we should close your agency down, cut taxes, and things will probably get better. But the other thing to understand, here, I'll give you one specific example of what's been going on. There was a bill, a previous session, that came, and it was going to mandate that when you build a house, you have to put a charging center for electric car in it. Had to do it, okay? They're gonna mandate it. And I just, I said, well, if somebody wants to put it in, let them. They said, well, it's only $500. Oh, we're already 200,000 higher than South Dakota, so what's the difference? But, so I said, you know what? If you mandate this, I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen. Today, that charging center is $500. Next year, it'll be $1,000. In a couple of years, it'll be $1,500. Before you know it, it's gonna be $3,000. Because when the government mandates something like that, the people who make the product, guess what? They raise the price. Look at your light rail. Light rail is supposed to cost $1.2 billion. We're over $3 billion. Wherever government gets involved, it activates a part of human nature. You know what that is? Greed, greed, more greed, okay? How do I get that money in my pocket? That's the sad part about Marxism. So anyway, the point is that as far as this is concerned, Minnesota has passed Green New Deal, which doesn't help the environment. Houses have to breathe. They're trying to keep commercial and private houses from breathing. Again, we're 200,000 higher for the same house than South Dakota. We're higher than Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, Illinois. Not by a little bit, by tens of thousands of dollars. Because we pass all these mandates, which most of them are worthless. But they drive up the cost and they make it hard for young people to get into a house. So then they come along and say, well, we're gonna raise taxes and give people subsidies to buy. Well, get rid of some of the nonsense that you're putting on these houses. I mean, how did we do it 50 years ago? Anybody here not live in a house 50 years ago? I did, okay? And I made it. I didn't die. Anyway, you can tell I'm frustrated with it.
I'm gonna talk about the HOA. There was a bill that did come forward this year. I did vote for that bill. Again, what I hear the most in our district, in my district, is affordability. I mean, and so when I was down in Florida on a quick Easter break for a few days, you could literally see a 4-story house, and then the next block over, you could see modular homes, or you could see, you know, all different kinds, and people could have 5 sheds on their property, or they could, now, not every city loves this. Lots of people love HOAs looking pretty, and even in our own caucus, we had very healthy debates around this bill. But one of our pillars was affordability and property rights. And so you're gonna probably see some of your own representatives. I might have voted for it, and maybe Senator Gruenhagen voted against it.
No, I didn't.
I don't know.
It was one of the bills I voted for.
Way to go. That's one thing. But the other thing about makeups, if you're wondering, if you get kind of nerdy and you want to look at voting records and how we vote on things, I love that. And if you're ever concerned, you go, Gilman, why did you vote for this? Call me, get a hold of me. I want to have those conversations so I can tell you why. Now there's people online that will speculate, and they'll call us all kinds of names, and they'll say all kinds of things. And that, I'd rather have them just call me and say, hey, why did you vote for that? I voted for it because of affordability and giving local control and giving people their, you know, their rights to what they want to do on their properties, and not having the mandates of, if you're in an HOA, you have to have a playground, or you have to have this, or you have to have all these different things. That does drive up the cost too. So that's why I stood behind that vote, and I felt really comfortable about that one. So
We spend a lot of money in housing in Minnesota. And I'm in the housing business. I've been in this business, in this space most of my life. I think where we spend a lot of our money, I think we need to get back to the basics. We need to get back to, I like people to own something. I like them to have some roots and build their roots in Litchfield or whatever community. I want them to have a piece of property of their own, and not just pay rent. And so much of where we spend money, us in St. Paul, goes, I'm not picking on us, I'm just saying the legislature in general is spending towards a lot of multifamily housing concepts that I'm just not a fan of. And so I want us to get back to individual ownership of homes for people, and I believe there is a way.
Yeah, I think the best housing bill that I've ever seen is to take all of the budget from all the housing agencies and put it into a buy down program, just to buy down interest rates. for first-time home buyers and people that qualify, and it was an interesting bill. It was to do away with all the agencies whatsoever and just say, hey, guess what? If you meet the guidelines of what the state of Minnesota says your income should be, you can qualify for a reduced interest rate.
Maybe we should run
it was-
that bill this year.
Yeah, it was an amazing concept where I thought, that probably, talk about wealth building for individuals, just to be able to own a home that may not qualify either, credit rating is whatever it is, or you don't have that first-time home buyer down payment, and you're looking at a 7% interest rate right now. We could buy that down to 3.5. We do it for all kinds of other things.
And again, it really digs people into a community.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel vested. And that's what we want. We want people to be vested in Litchfield.
We do it for all
Grove
of
City, and-
everything else, we call it economic development.
Yeah.
So we can do the same thing.
Right.
So in the interest of time here, I want to go down through each of you, get just a minute, Glenn, to talk. So,
I better give you,
no,
I can jab you.
Closing words, Scott. What do you want the audience to hear?
Well, I just, it's been my honor to serve you. I think there's lots of work that we have got left. There's a piece that we didn't talk about. It was First District. First District
Oh,
is
good point.
a real key component of this community and this region, and it stretches into so many people and farmers, and I think we did some good work in the last session for First District through a bonding piece that they were running into some discharge issues that they were receiving huge fines, and they came to the legislature, and I think we took appropriate action. Again, I look forward to continuing to serve. I do this job because it's my opportunity to give and to serve. And I just want to see things better and stronger for rural Minnesota. I have a passion. I've lived here my entire life. Rural Minnesota is important to me. And just thank you all for taking the time to be here and be part of this.
my next, I suppose. Yes, you better time me now. No, hey, everything we talked about and the problems can be solved. I don't care what party you're in, we can solve these. Government, most of the time, is not the solution. To say government and affordability is an oxymoron in most cases. It creates unaffordability. You have to understand that. And we cannot grow government faster than the private sector, which we've been doing, because you're going to do more damage than good for our children and grandchildren. You've got to understand that we have to bring that into balance. We grew government at 40% at one point, a couple years ago. Did your income go up 40%? I doubt it. You're paying in the money to cover that. We've got to you see so much bipartisanship and working together if we limited spending to private sector growth. But when you want to grow government faster than the private sector, that's doing more damage than good. And you've got to understand that. And we've got to solve these problems in healthcare, education, and the rest, and they can be solved. I believe that. We need you to participate. Thank you. God bless you.
Awesome, thanks so much. There's a few little things that I got done, starting at House File 1270 on down, that I'm grateful for. Again, in the health and human services world, if I can affect and impact scope practices, I'm all for the majority of those things that help out, and it ends up helping out our rural, especially our rural areas in greater Minnesota. So the biggest one, House File 1274, direct primary care, that service agreement being established, basically just safeguarded and put it into a safe harbor that direct primary care access would never be under the insurance umbrella. So if you want to talk about that one, we can get into the weeds with that one, but it makes things more affordable for Minnesotans, I believe. You can have a subscription. It will help your insurance rates go down as well. So when insurance carriers will also get both, they'll have folks get both. We do it for our employees. We buy it for them. And it's just we have a healthier workforce. It's been really, really great. So Silver Lake's finally going to have non-orange water. Biggest thing that we were able to get done with their bonding bill. And then we fixed a few things in some other areas for Civil Air Patrol in Hutchinson has a regional center, training center, and so there was one word missing in their bill from 2 years ago that had to get fixed. And thankfully, Tina Liebling, she's my Democrat colleague in the House, she got up there, but she allowed that signature to go through so we could fix a past bill. So, you know, again, these are relationships. I just want to leave this. I'm going to keep working very hard. I am a bulldog. I love locking arms with as many folks as I can that have lived experience. One thing I'm very passionate about is the substance use folks and people that do the work of substance use might not have the shiniest of backgrounds, but the peer recovery supports and different things that we've been doing in that, again, has been very collaborative. And so we're trying to create guardrails around that, but also, so it's not, there's no waste, fraud, or abuse happening there, but then helping people and helping families be healthy and strong is something I'm really passionate about. So I'm really grateful that, you know, from my experiences that every family's been touched by potentially substance use things. And so that is good work. And we're going to continue to do that. So I'm grateful to be here. This has been wonderful. Lots of words flying around. So thank you so much for listening.
First of all, I'd like to, thank Steve. He has really got his finger on the pulse of things around Meeker County. It's nice to have an advocate in your corner that's going to text you late at night and tell you something's going on.
Yeah.
Thanks to the chamber. I've been very, pushing the chamber or AMC or other, statewide organizations to, hey guys, guess what? We're in the legislature. The Democrats and the Republicans don't always listen to each other. They listen to these guys. They listen to the chamber for real concerns that are going on. They listen to AMC. AMC has become much more politically active. I think that's a good thing. Thanks to the hospital for having us here today and doing the tour. That was very nice. And truthfully, thanks to my fellow legislators. It takes a village, right? We're a small village, us guys sitting up here. To have a team that is versed in all kinds of just different subject matter areas really makes a difference. You guys are well served in this area, you truly are. Between Wilmer, Litch, Monty, Hutch, we have a very robust legislative caucus. We really do. We are, well received in St. Paul as a group. It expands, and it really means things when you see these bonding bills that come in our district. It's because of the work that these guys and myself do in St. Paul. So, I've been doing this for 10 years. Like Scott said, I don't know how long we're going to be able to do this. I truly enjoy this. I'm glad for all you to come out today and just hear us babble on for a little bit. I appreciate it. And, we're all going to be applying for a job again in November. And we'll see how that goes. So, yeah. Thanks again for putting it on.
Thanks to the legislators. Thank you to everyone here that came. Hopefully you are inspired now to have some conversations with your coworkers, with your families, with your business owners. That's the only way we're going to solve some of these problems and having conversation and agree to disagree if that's necessary. But let's give these folks a hand for coming.